And my mom said, would you want to play drums? Didn't think anything of it. I was, 4 or 5 years old? It was just a thing to do. When I was 10 years old, I got really, really ill. I would sit there, I'd watch YouTube videos, I'd learn, I'd read drum books. I mean, that's all I had. When I kind of got inducted into this whole rock, metal, hardcore scene at 2, I didn't know what to expect.
That was influencer, clinician, and drummer virtuoso Greyson Nekrutman. And this is Music and Artists, a show for and about musicians. We're about to jump into the conversation, but first some banter. We got to talk to Greyson Nekrutman at one of our stores in Long Island.
Yes, we did. It was a blast. We got to get with him between his very busy touring schedule, just the weekend before he'd been down in our Marietta location doing this awesome clinic that we heard all these great stories from, and he had a blast, and everybody that got to attend had a great time. Some really cool stories he gets into when we interview him. And then we got to catch up with him in Long Island at our Rocky Point, New York store. Shout out to George, the store manager there, who was a huge help in facilitating that day. We had an absolute blast with him and just getting to hang out and talk shop and learn about him and his life.
Yeah, it was really inspiring conversation. It was cool to see somebody, despite being very young, undeniable talent at a young age, but having accomplished so much in just a short period of time. And then I really appreciated how diverse his music interest was, where, 1 minute he's being compared to Buddy Rich and he's a rising star and as a jazz musician, but then he also has contemporary and punk rock influences, and he's doing covers of various music and lots of commentary on different types of drumming and different genres. And it was just really cool to have just a wide scope of interest.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that I love about Greyson when I first discovered him was, he really rose to popularity because he was a jazz drummer. He was a young teenage jazz drummer, specifically big band drumming, and he made that look cool. He brought back all the excitement of the drummers from the 40s and 50s and 60s to a brand new generation that are now discovering Buddy Rich and Louis Bellson and all these giants and their music, right? And he found a way to make it relevant and cool and accessible to, again, another generation of musicians. And he got to talk about his entire life story, his origin, and a struggle that he had with a health scare. I mean, it's just, he's had a lot of life in his 21 years on this earth, and I was really honored to get to talk to him.
Well, I can't wait for them to jump into the conversation. Check it out.
Greyson Nekrutman, welcome to Music and Artists. Thanks for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yes.
Thanks for allowing me to be here.
You have been compared to Buddy Rich by multiple big name drummers out in the sphere, right? What does that feel like?
The whole Buddy Rich thing, coming from somebody who, I wouldn't say came from nothing, but came from a background of having to work for everything I have now and have, gathered over the few years I've been playing. It's mind-blowing, but at the same time, you always have to kind of remind yourself, I did work so hard to gain everything I have. So when people make these comparisons, it's a little bit like, I don't think I'm at that level, but it's a good feeling, yet it reminds me to keep working hard to get further than I already have.
You have had an amazing career for somebody at only 21 years old. I saw, as I was digging through your social media, you got a special shout out from Stewart Copeland, right, on his social media. What does it feel like to have somebody at that level say, keep an eye on this guy, he's the one to watch out for?
I got a weird DM from somebody, and it was this lady, and she said, hey, I don't know if you saw it, but Stewart Copeland mentioned you. And I was like, what? And at first I thought it was like a scam, because, you get tons of those kind of messages.
Yeah, come on.
And so she sent me this link to a Twitter video he made, which was in response to somebody else's question. And it was basically like, who are you looking out for?
Nekrutman, that young Nekrutman fellow playing all the big band stuff. Keep an eye on him.
And I was like, wait a minute, like, is this real? So for a moment it was it was shocking. And then I was kind of like, all right, again, just another confirmation I need to keep working harder.
What is that thing you're working on now that's the goal? Whether it's, songwriting or writing with a band or it's just working on your technique. What is that thing you're really pushing towards?
I don't know if there's one specific thing on drums or in life or anything. It's just to be better than I was. And it's so cliche to say better than I was today or yesterday, but it's the truth. I always say that I was never born a talented musician. I was never born a talented drummer, talented this or that. But what I believe I'm talented at is working hard. So whether in high school I wasn't going out and partying or hanging out and having girlfriends and this and that in high school, that time was used practicing. That time was used not going to gigs because it was used in the basement where I would work on things that I just simply could not do. So that attitude of kind of sacrifice and working hard, there will never be kind of a destination for me. Like I never feel like, oh, I've made it of any sort. Yeah, there's times where I'm like, oh, it's awesome.
Yeah.
But again, it's just another thing. If I didn't allow myself to feel another challenge, I would just fall apart. I always want something to challenge me. I've listened to a lot of interviews from people I look up to, and one of the things that I've heard a lot is people always talk about quote-unquote famous people get messed up. Famous people kind of lose themselves. They kind of lose their this and that. And when I started to get any sense of, fame or whatever you want to call it, I don't think I felt that, but I could see how somebody could, if that makes sense. So I could see the signs where I'm like, okay, if I had a different mindset, this is bringing me down a very bad path. Like, this is not... Yeah, if I took this day and I exacerbated that over 10 years and I did this every day, Then again, if I went this other way and I did this for 10 years, it's a whole different outlook. There's been many people I looked up to who talk about always challenging themselves. And for me, it's not even drums. It's fitness, it's running. I do marathons, I do this, I do that. And if I didn't have something else to challenge me, I don't think I'd be able to keep doing this.
That's really important. That's not something we talk about as musicians very often is having those passions outside of music and applying that same work ethic to it.
This is something I kind of fell in love with as a child, playing drums, and it was a fun activity to do.
Mm-hmm.
Then it becomes your job. What I see happen is a lot of people hold on to the same amount of emotional tie to the instrument as they get older. And for me, I couldn't, which I'm happy I did, because if for me, it was like if I held on to that tie of like, I'm only doing this for the music and creative and that whole thing, and I didn't view it as kind of a tool set, like I was an electrician or a plumber or whatever, I don't think I'd be able to even stay here and do it and keep going, because it's challenging and it's a lot of...
It's not for the faint of heart.
No, not at all. And so if I have another outlet to express that creativeness or that drive or that passion or that energy, that's kind of keeps that fire going.
So let's back up and just briefly talk about your story. So you are at an amazing point in your career. Again, at such a young age. Let's talk about rewind the clock. What was your first memory? At what age of sitting behind the kit?
4.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I picked up the sticks at 4. I had a family friend, Bagiti Kumalo, played bass for Paul Simon and a bunch of other artists. Yeah, so I remember going over to his house. He lived locally at the time, and he kind of would show me the drums, but that wasn't the seed or anything. And my mother at the time was kind of finding things for me and my brothers to do, and I have 2 older brothers, and my middle brother, saxophone player, and he was taking lessons, and I would go on every Saturday to this pre-college program he would do, and I would sit there with my mom and wait. And my brother's best friend at the time was a drummer, and his mom and my mom became friends and said, oh yeah, so my son's doing this and that. And my mom said, oh, look, who's your son's teacher? And it was this gentleman named Justin Gallo. And my mom said, would you want to play drums? And I said, I don't know, like it was something to do, like play tennis, do this, that. I said, sure, I'll try it.
Another hobby.
Exactly.
Right.
Didn't think anything of it. I was, 4 or 5 years old. It was just a thing to do. Went over one Saturday, met Justin, and we just kind of did it as like a little trial, see if I liked it. And it very quickly became something that every Saturday I would go to his house, we'd play together, he would show me different things. But again, I'm thankful it entered my life so young, because it kind of just became part of me. As stupid and cliche, I hate that stuff.
No.
It just became part of the weekly routine. Like every Saturday I was going for a lesson.
Yeah.
It was just this thing. I mean, I wasn't practicing 8 hours a day when I was young.
Sure.
When I was, mid-child, teenage years as I was. But when I was little, it was nothing serious. It was just something that I seemed to click with, and again, led to this.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Justin. So that was your first drum teacher. How long did you work with Justin?
From when I was 4 or 5 till I was about 15.
Wow. So the better part of a decade.
Yeah. He played and still does a huge role in my life. An older brother kind of mentor role. When I was 10 years old, I got really, really ill. I was out of school for many, 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 many years. I was out of school from basically 10 to about 15, 16. So during that time, I was at Justin's every week. So he was my only kind of interaction outside of hospitals and in my house and whatever. Go over there with something to do, something to keep me happy. But then during the week, all I did was practice because I had literally all day long to practice. I could practice all day in my house. So I would sit there, I'd watch YouTube videos, I'd learn, I'd read drum books. I mean, that's all I had. So then once I kind of got my health back together and living a normal-ish life, at like 16 or 17, obviously I was a little bit ahead of most of the other people in, my little local drum community. So that's kind of when I first was like, there's something here.
So you mentioned your illness and how much that impacted your life. Can you look back on that period now and seeing the influence that it had on you becoming a drummer and having all this success? Can you now look at that as a positive?
That was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. Second to that would be another disappointment. Third to that would be another disappointment. I really believe in the whole thing of something that could be a disappointment today. You look back on and it's like, oh, if that bridge didn't burn down, what could have happened?
That's right.
I am honestly really thankful it happened because it taught me a hell of a lot about life and about everything. Yeah.
I love that attitude about it because, for some people that maybe don't have the same willpower, the same work ethic, something like that happens in their life, especially at such a young age, it can derail their whole future.
If somebody, and I mean this in the best way possible, has it a little easier growing up, easier in any sense of anything. A hobby comes easier to them, an art comes easier, whatever it is. The kids that didn't have to study in school, like we always joked about that, right?
Yeah.
They'd get A's. Then the minute anything tough comes their way, they fall to pieces. If anything, it prepared me for the tougher things that would happen.
Made you stronger.
100%. Because tougher things are going to happen. Arguably, that's probably the toughest thing I'll ever face in my life. There's always going to be something difficult. Now, if your barometer for what actually is difficult and what actually stresses you out is way higher, your day-to-day life is a hell of a lot
easier. Right, exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Yes.
Talking about Justin, talking about your drum lessons for those 10 years. So I kind of want to shift gears and dig in more to music education, which I know is something you're very passionate about. I know you've had experiences where you've gotten to study with a number of different teachers, one-on-one group settings, different programs as you were coming up as a kid. Can you tell me a little bit about maybe one of your best interactions?
Instantly, I know the best.
Okay.
It sounds biased because we are like probably some of the closest friends now you could have with somebody. But when I was, I'm going to say 14, 15, 16, in that little range there, my mom and I reached out to Billy Rymer from the Dillinger Escape Plan. Again, local Long Island legend drummer. This is a story I tell at every drum clinic, everything, and it's not that kind of big, but it was to me, so that's why I'll share it. So he came over, and I think we can all agree, all musicians, we get a little bit, sometimes a little, maybe OCD you call it, where like you want everything perfect and this and that.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So I was very much like that, and I thought, yeah, I could practice, but you know what? The pedal tension isn't right. That's why I'm not good.
Oh, okay. I got you.
So he comes over and he sits down on my drum set and he puts his foot on the bass drum and he says, oh, it's too tight. And I was a kid. I had no idea how to tune drums.
Sure.
So I just looked at him. I was like, eh. So he takes off the pedal. He throws my floor dom to the side and he flips up the bass drum and loosens all the lugs on it, puts it back, doesn't put the pedal back on, keeps the floor tom maybe 3 feet away. Cymbals are all over, and I'm over here having like a mini panic attack because I'm like, I took 8 hours to perfect.
Everything is exactly where it needs to be. Right.
The most efficient drum set.
Yes. Yeah.
He rips that thing harder than I've ever seen a drummer rip a drum set in my entire life to this day. In my basement. Just the fluidity, the speed, the power, everything was something that just I had never witnessed in my entire life. And I was like, And then he got up and walked away. He was in ripped jeans, like beat up Adidas. Like, it was just like the vibe of badassery of like, he just did not care about anything.
Yeah.
That showed me more than I could ever ask any teacher to ever show me. And to this day, I mentioned that to him. And it's funny because I don't think he understands the impact it had to me, He laughs, but I don't think it really
Yeah.
But to me, that showed me so much. Because after that, it kind of slowly showed me, maybe, you do got to be tougher on yourself and not so, And it's almost, I'm sure you're familiar with David Goggins.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with him with the running shoes. He doesn't wear fancy running shoes. He'd rather invest in his time and effort into making himself better.
That's right. It's about him. It's not about the equipment.
So I started telling people that, and people were like, because I joke, I'm like the anti-drummer. Because I'll show up, and you just witnessed, it's like, I care so much about other things that I don't have time to worry about the little stuff. Now, some of it matters, of course.
Sure.
Of course. I'll set my throne height, yada, yada. But that was probably the number one thing I ever learned in drum or music education, was really that enforcement of, you got to put the responsibility on yourself to get better, and not the gear and not everything else external. Because we sometimes get stressed out about our internal skills or whatever and start to blame other things.
Can you name one or maybe a couple of the aha moments when you were studying with somebody? What was one of those moments that you went, oh, and then it unlocked that next level? Maybe you hit a wall and in, with technique or with, coordination, whatever it happened to be. And then boom, somebody just said something, showed you something, and then all of a sudden it clicked.
There's like 2 or 3 I can think of.
Okay.
The first one, again with Justin, he showed me a samba bass drum pattern, and he said, can you play a parallel over it? And I lost my mind. I was like, no, I can't. With the I was like, no, there's no way I could possibly do that. No way. So I sat there, tried to do note by note, couldn't do it. The theory of trying to have my feet do something completely different,
Totally independent from your hands, yeah. Sure.
was just, I could not do it. And he literally said that to me, though. He said, once you get this, it'll unlock all these doors, Greyson. Keep working at it. And I was kind of annoyed. I was like, sure, it will. So then literally I spent hours in my room practicing. And I remember my mom, I think, was like, all right, are you done yet? Like, did you do it yet? Because I was still playing in my room and the whole house would shake.
You can only hear that bass drum ostinato for so long.
While she's cooking dinner.
Right, before you lose your mind.
Yeah. So poor mom on that one. But eventually got it. And that was the first one where I was like, whoa. And then the second one wasn't that crazy. It was like my left hand technique, where I kind of realized I kind of have this theory where I think a lot of people preach like, oh, are you taking lessons? Or, we always want to study. And I agree.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also a point where you may find, if you're going into something very particular, you'll find multiple people have differing opinions on it, which again is amazing.
Sure.
But when they start to conflict to the point where you don't even know who you are, So I got to that with my left hand technique because I was having a million people tell me, this is right, this is wrong, that's wrong, Greyson, you're wrong, Greyson, you're right, Greyson, you're wrong. And I said, okay, not screw you to all you yet, but like, let me kind of not listen to any of you and let me figure out what works.
Yeah.
And I took a little bit from every person, put them together, and then realized, again, how cliche it sounds, there weren't as many rules as we are told and kind of taught to believe. I kind of made up the technique as I went and found what works best for me. Now, there'll be a ton of people who say, oh, your left-hand technique, yada, yada, it's not right, it's not tradition. Okay.
But it's working for you. And the proof's in the pudding.
Exactly.
Because, from where I'm sitting, you have one of the fastest left hands I have seen, especially for somebody playing traditional grip. I mean, that's amazing. And just to reference it, you're talking about your joystick technique, right? Mm-hmm. But I think that is a really unique, you kind of challenge the system with that.
Yeah.
And I would say that's very indicative of your entire journey.
Oh, 100%.
Right? So when I was digging into other interviews that you had done and learning about your story, learning about your life, it seemed like you've had a lot of instances where people have said, no, Greyson, that's not the right That's not the right technique. No, Greyson, you shouldn't play so busy. Don't cover up this part. Don't do this. Don't do that, right? You're playing too hard, too flashy, whatever the criticism might be.
Yeah.
But you touched on something a second ago that as a drummer, I can say the older I've gotten, I've found to be 100% true. We're all individual people, right? We're all built differently from our physiology to our personality, everything in between.
Mm-hmm.
And what works for you might not necessarily work for me, right?
Exactly.
So who am I as another drummer, or any other drummer for that matter, to look at Greyson Nekrutman and say, that left-hand technique is wrong?
Yep.
Because then you listen to you play, you could hear it. It's smooth, it's clean, it's fast. It's like, this is, if that's what works for Greyson. And my understanding is, since you've introduced that, probably 2 years ago or 3 years ago that you kind of really got into talking about it?
Yep.
Okay. A lot of people have adopted it and started working with that. I mean, that's got to be a super cool feeling too, right?
Absolutely. But what you're talking about, where everybody's unique in this and that, I love to hear, because, again, I do seem to have this theme of challenging the system in all different ways. But when I kind of got inducted into this whole rock, metal, hardcore scene at 2, I didn't know what to expect. Mm-hmm. I thought everybody's going to rag on the jazz kid, everybody's going to rag on the kid from New York, this and that. If anything, they were the most welcoming people ever, because they understood the exact same thing you're talking about, which was, if at the end of the day, the most important thing is, if somebody is as stupid as it sounds, again, nice.
Yep.
If you're a nice person, does the technique matter?
Good point.
That's kind of what I learned, I think, from living on the road, touring, traveling, is to stop thinking so much about this instrument. To stop, like I touched on really early in this interview, the emotional kind of attachment. When it becomes, you're on the road, you're doing it 24/7, you do have to let go a little bit. You cannot worry about every little thing. You need to worry about the external things that are more important to relationships and this and that amongst the people you're around, and not be so crazy specific about, oh, I'm still, I'm trying to perfect this. No, Greyson, we have to go. Like,
right.
We got things to do.
Yeah.
And it becomes a little bit of a job, but that's not a bad thing. It's a great thing. But when it becomes a job, a lot of people who are meant to be in that position, I believe, adopt your thought, which is everybody's unique in their own way. And if you're nice, you're great, perfect. But everybody can do it their own way. And if it works and we can get that job done on stage tonight, wonderful. That's all that matters.
Biggest piece of advice for an aspiring musician starting out?
Try to find who you are, and don't close your mind off to different styles and different approaches, but at the same time, find what makes you happy. Because you may have a skill in a particular vein of music or whatever it may be. And people are going to want to take advantage of your skill at that thing. But if that doesn't make you happy playing that, you have to find a way to love it. And you have to find a way to keep it fresh. There's nothing that I do or any other drummer or any other musician does that nobody else can do. And that is like the most like, oh, come on, Greyson. But I always boil it down to this at clinics. I'll do like a crazy solo, and then I'll stop and I'll tell everybody, yeah, you can play exactly what I just played. And they'll all be like, oh, ha, 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 this is so funny. Yeah, they think it's so funny. And I'll say, no, I'm not being funny. Drumming is a combination of 1 to 2 hits per limb at a time. Maybe 3, if we're really good, maybe 3 hits on per limb at a time. So if I taught you to play some crazy solo, but we had to go 1 hit, snare drum, wait 5 minutes, hit the bass drum in 5 minutes, hit the ride cymbal in 5 minutes. Even if you sat down for 2 weeks and you finally played it in full, and that whole sequence, didn't you play the exact same thing I just played?
Absolutely.
Can't anybody just do anything with enough practice and hard work?
Yeah, if you break it down to its smallest parts, and you take time, anybody can do it. I've had teachers say that to me. I've said it to some of my private drum students over the years. It's very true. But when somebody watches somebody like yourself play at that level, and then you turn around and say, you can do this, I understand that knee-jerk reaction of like, yeah, right, Greyson, sure.
It came out of frustration for me.
Okay.
Because I watched, as I'm sure a lot of us have, these YouTube videos where people claim things are impossible.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was young, I saw the Buddy Rich Impossible solo. literally entitled Impossible. And all the comments underneath, all of the comments said, the best, nobody will ever be as good, nobody could ever do this. There were so many nevers, impossibles, unachievables, too good, like all those words. And some reason, I don't know why, I could be crazy, I definitely am. Those words got to me. They pissed me off, and I said, says who?
Yeah, so those fueled you. You said, okay.
Yeah, because I was just like, well, why?
Right.
He's fast, he's great, but what is so good? Just to challenge it, just because I can. Because nobody can tell me, oh, you can't challenge it.
Well, and Greyson, I think that's a testament to you and your work ethic outside of being a musician. Those Buddy Rich, recordings have been around for decades, right? And so many drummers have kind of propagated that myth of this is unachievable, right?
Yes.
So I love that you're coming into the fold as this young up-and-coming drummer that's setting the world on fire, and you said, you know what? Nothing is impossible. Not only am I going to do this, but then I'm going to go show other people how to do it and break down that wall of thinking of, nobody can do this because it's Buddy Rich, right?
Because if you put yourself in the mindset of it's impossible, it is.
That's right.
The minute you say, oh, it's impossible, and you're sitting on the couch, not practicing, and you're just scrolling, and you said, oh, it's impossible. See ya, let me go, learn some other song. It's a lot easier. Well, why? I kind of realized when I was learning drums, there was two ways to approach things when I was learning them. My first drum influence of all time, biggest of all time, is Carter Beauford.
And mine too. That's amazing.
Number one, all day long. And when I was a kid, and I'm sure you'll relate to this, my school of thought was, I want to learn how to play number 41, one of their big songs. And I said, okay. So in Greyson's mind, he said, you can build all your skills, your independence, your speed, your this, your that, independently to one day, build those skills all the way to equal Carter's skills. And then you're able to play that same part as Carter, right? That's kind of like an indirect way of approaching it.
Yeah.
Or there is, okay, or I could slow down the song. And yeah, my feet aren't as fast as Carter. My hands aren't as fast as Carter. But if I build my skills by learning the song, and I start the song at 75% speed, and then 80, then 85, then 90. When it's at 100% speed, aren't I as fast as Carter? So that was the same thing with Buddy Rich. Of, if you're technically playing the same thing as somebody, you played it, you did it. So I think people kind of psych themselves out by like, oh, let me work for 20 years on my left hand and one day I'll be as good as this person. It's like, well, or you could just attack what you're looking at.
If you could give one piece of advice to another drum teacher, what would that be?
I almost want to say, don't be afraid to allow the students to be supported in whatever they like. You kind of have to put your own personal music tastes, your own personal this and that aside for a minute. And if this kid is so passionate about learning this or that and wants to do this or that very specific thing, a lot of teachers want to take in their work experience or their professional playing experience kind of thing. Well, that wouldn't work in a live band. Who cares? It's important to learn both the really fun, exciting things and the usable studio, this and that stuff. But if all the kid wants to learn is this crazy fast, whatever it is, because that's what kids want to learn, of course, let them, teach them. But then again, allow them to also learn all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. And going further into that, it's find a middle ground in between. My middle ground of learning jazz was big band because it was exciting to me. It was fun.
It was flashy. Big sound, yeah.
So find a middle ground. But if the kid really wants to learn whatever it is, or the adult, however old the person is learning, allow them to.
My first experience with you was maybe 2 years ago, and I'm just doing the doom scrolling thing that we all do. We're getting ready to fall asleep, and then I see this kid just tearing up these big band tunes. And I think the first one I saw was your cover of the Jetsons theme. You are exposing a whole new generation of drummers in this digital TikTok social media age to jazz and big band drumming, and you've made it cool. What does that kind of music mean to you, and why was that where you really wanted to show off your skill set?
Well, that's where the anti-drummer part comes in.
Okay.
It was a tool. It was 1,000% a tool. It was a tool that I used to better my own playing. One, I realized if I could take the things I learned from watching and listening to all those old big band videos and stuff and incorporate it into my other styles, it would allow me to be different than everybody else. There was a separation between the passion, emotional Greyson and the work, business, be better Greyson. This was 1,000% the work, be better Greyson. Because I realized these drummers were faster than a lot of modern drummers. Like, these guys were doing things that modern drummers weren't doing. There's a million things that I just noticed, the entertainment value that was kind of forgotten, and they were doing that. Nowadays, I've even seen like modern big name drummers talk down upon tricks and this and that and entertainment. They're like, oh, one guy said he was like embarrassed to watch his own old videos when he was a kid doing tricks. And I thought to myself, well, why? It's like this cliche of like, they think it's not cool. It's like, well, people would go to see Sonny Payne with Count Basie because it was entertaining.
That's right.
You would bring your whole family to a little amphitheater, and there used to be one around here in Stony Brook. It used to be an old jazz amphitheater where Buddy Rich and all those guys would play. And it was an outing. You would go there as like, let's go see this event, this entertainment thing.
Sure.
And that went away. So I kind of viewed it as, these videos will do good. Nobody is doing this.
Yeah.
And by making the videos, I'm incorporating those skills into my own playing because I need to learn the videos, so I need to be able to play that. All in all, my playing is going to grow. But also at the same time, it was something to make myself completely different because just like you said, nobody else was doing that.
Well, you just touched on something that I think is kind of brings this whole full circle, right? So you said, you know, you miss the showmanship from modern drummers that you would see in the Sonny Paynes and the big band drummers of the 40s and 50s. That's not just limited to your playing. You do the costuming, the wardrobe. I noticed as I was watching your videos, you do a hip hop tune, a cover. You're in an Adidas jacket, right? You're doing big band stuff. You're in a tux and suspenders. And it's like you recognize we are artists, but also entertainers as musicians.
Yeah. And the biggest thing for the costumes and everything was I was getting way too much of, oh, he's just a jazz drummer. So that was the danger of that whole thing.
Didn't want to be pigeonholed.
There's too much of a good thing. Too much of a good thing happens in everything, but this was prime example because I self-admitted, put myself in a box, 100%. Everybody thought I was just a jazz drummer, so to actually break out of it was hard. It was really hard. And I knew that certain artists wouldn't want a kid who could only wear tuxes and only plays jazz on their stage. So he said, yeah, I actually can play in a t-shirt. Like, I can do that. Like, you know. So that's where it came from, to kind of do everything. And then slowly opportunities came and people saw me in other contexts and they're like, oh, he's just like a drummer. He just does it, like everything. And I was like, well, that's like my goal. Yeah.
Sure.
But I think it's great because it kind of definitely separated me in many ways.
I'm a big fan of Pearl. You're a Pearl artist. Can you tell me a little bit about why Pearl and how that came to be?
First kit I ever played was Pearl Form kit when I was like 6 years old. My parents got it from me. I still have the kit, and that kit lasted me a long time. The pedals too, everything, the stands, everything lasted a long time. I bought some other kits from shoveling snow. I experimented and did in whatever and bought different kits and different brands, and there was always something wrong with something, especially the hardware. That was like my biggest thing. And then the minute I started playing gigs, I realized on top of the drums being sturdy and sounded great and yada yada, the hardware from companies what really separates it. So for me, it was like, especially being on tour now.
Yeah.
No, I can't have a pedal fall apart and not be able to get in contact with them for 4 days. Shout out to John from Pearl. And I mean, I can call up John and when I'm in wherever, South America or Australia, and be like, hey, I need a pedal. Okay, it'll be there in 2 days. But man, just the level of craftsmanship and even actually as a non-artist playing Pearl, like somebody who's not an artist, you can call them and they will answer. Like you can call their Nashville office and they will talk to you for hours and you could order. It's like, there's a difference.
And you could tie that back into music, right? We were talking about this earlier, but how important the personal relationships are. Yes, it's you got to be a good player. You got to gel with the people you're performing with. But at the end of the day, you got to be a good hang.
You will not survive. You will not. Because nobody wants And it's funny because I have to describe this to like my friends who aren't doing this and my family and stuff. But at that 5 a.m. lobby call where everybody was out till 3 a.m. the night before, then you played a show and you have a show to play tonight and you're getting on a plane to play a show. Nobody wants a guy in the lobby to be, hey guys, at 5 in the morning. Or, oh, it's so awful. They're like, no, just go in it. But the minute everybody's kind of cool and going with the flow and everybody's chill and easy, that's when it works.
What would you say are your long-term musical goals? What kind of impact when you know, decades down the road, when you wind your career down and look back, what do you want to say you accomplished? What do you hope to accomplish?
To be in that list of the greatest of all time. I don't need to be everybody's number one, but to be one of the best to have ever played. Because I'll never be everybody's number one. And it doesn't have to be any list formally, ever. But when people say drummers, they already mention names. There is a group of drummers people always think of. Non-drummers think of them. Just like soccer players. Ronaldo, Messi, this person, that person. But you don't think of necessarily one, but you think of a few. That's where I want to be.
What are you listening to now? Who's got you excited? Either in the percussion community or just bands, artists in general.
Probably bands, but it's funny because it's nobody new.
Okay.
And it's nothing groundbreaking, and it's probably everything people would not think of. Like, listen to everything, from Deftones to Pink Floyd to Avenged Sevenfold to Dave Matthews Band, to Slayer. I mean, you could do every Rush. Everywhere. It's kind of strange. My Spotify is everything. So unfortunately, the answer is literally everything.
Okay.
But all those kind of bands.
Well, that influences how eclectic you are as a drummer. Yes, you came to popularity from your jazz drumming, but you've now broken out of that, and you've played with all these other amazing artists, and you're expanding your horizons, all these other genres. So I'm assuming to stay hip to all that, you have a very eclectic listening path.
Just, I mean, like what I enjoy. Like I would never listen to Tara Power at the gym.
Sure.
You know? So
situational.
Exactly. That's exactly what it is. Last night I was sitting in bed listening to, I don't remember, random alternative 2000s, and then I'll go to the gym in a little bit and blasting probably Avenged Sevenfold or something.
What's next for Greyson Nekrutman? What's on the horizon? Let's talk about that.
Man, this is going to be a crazy year. A lot of touring, a lot of traveling.
Do you ever just have those moments where you're like, this is my life. Like, I get to tour and do these amazing gigs, and I'm getting shout outs from Stewart Copeland, hanging out with John Stamos at his house. And I mean, do you ever just have that kind of out of body experience?
I've had like a few, but there's one I remember, and it wasn't like morbid, but it was kind of like, we flew to Australia. It's an extremely long flight. Even from Los Angeles, it is so long. Left Los Angeles at like midnight. I slept at 8, this and that, and eventually we finally go through the clouds and we're landing in Australia. And I see the coastline of Australia, the gorgeous coastline. You could see like where the Great Barrier Reef is, the way we were coming in. We were right over it, and just you see the land. And I thought to myself, it's a completely different day than all my friends and family at home. Different side of the world, the furthest I could get from everybody. And I said to myself, my grandparents, my friends' grandparents, this and that, 90% of people have never been here in like my little circle of family. Like my grandparents never got the opportunity to. But here I am through just hitting things with sticks.
Yeah.
Here I am across the world, So that was kind of the first moment where I was like, wow, they died and grew up and lived their whole life on Long Island.
Yeah.
They left, they went to different states, but they never got here. And some people are cool with that, but I was kind of like, and some people unfortunately never have the opportunity to. But for me, it was kind of like another confirmation was, I want to keep doing this and see how far, like how many places I could go. Like how many wild, weird little towns can I find and just have fun with it.
Before we wrap up here, Grace, I have to share a personal connection that I think speaks to you as a player, you as a person, that I don't know has happened to me a ton as a drummer, which is as I was digging into your content, all your videos, I ran across a paradiddle exercise that you had shot, right? And I watched you play it, and you explained it really well, and you were like, this is the paradiddle exercise that I use. And I had watched a couple of other videos, and I immediately hit that pause button, got up, went over to the practice pad, sat down, and started working it out and just chopping it out for a while. And I know that probably doesn't sound like, and who am I? I'm just another drummer out of.
It's awesome to me, yeah.
But I know personally, I have not had a lot of content creators, other drummers that have made me want to like stop everything that I'm doing and go pick up sticks. So, and I think that is such a testament. And I know thousands and thousands of drummers all over the world and have had that same experience that I have listening to you play.
Thank you.
So, Greyson, it has been an absolute honor. I could sit here with you for 6 more hours.
Well, thank you for having me. Seriously.
You're an extraordinary guy, and we wish you, music and artists wish you all the best of luck. We, as the crew and myself, you're going to do great things, and we can't wait to watch.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thanks again to Greyson. We really enjoyed the conversation. This episode was brought to you by Pearl. Now, if you liked this episode, and we hope that you did, be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll endeavor to make more episodes just like this one. Oh, I got a meeting. Oh, and read it out.
This episode was produced by Melissa Reyes, Ian Scott Pullins, Mark Gauthier, and Owen Rye. Special thanks to George K. at the Music and Arts Store in Rocky Point, New York. Music and Artists is presented by your source for instruments, lessons, rentals, and repairs. Music and Arts. Musicians made here.